You should never judge a book by its cover, especially not a magical flying book with a taste for blood. On the surface, the Glitch Fairy is a fun, silly platformer that follows a rivalry between a mischievous star fairy and a powerhouse princess with a minigun. It's an adventure filled with depressed demons, cat-crazy witches, and all manner of maple syrup machinations that make for a really good time. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find it's also a lot more than that. The Glitch Fairy is a game about accepting change, showing both the importance of moving forward amid adversity and the consequences of remaining stuck in the past. It gives a grand depiction of the eternal struggle between order and chaos, touches on the subjective nature of reality, and even examines the rippling psychological impact of grief and trauma. These deeper layers are not immediately apparent, though, buried as they are under the game's charming veneer and only gradually revealed through a combination of cutscenes, dialogue, documents, compendium entries, secret areas, and multiple endings based on completion. If anything I've just described sounds interesting to you, then I would highly recommend checking the game out yourself before watching any further, since there are major spoilers for the whole story ahead. Pretty much all of them, in fact. But if you're okay with that, feel free to sit back, relax, and enjoy the full story of The Glitch Fairy. Let's begin with a very brief world overview to set the stage. The story takes place in the Spelani Kingdom, which can be thought of as the Central Continent. To the east is the appropriately named East Continent with the demon city Hell's capital at its center, and to the west is the technologically advanced West Continent. Other locations include the animal-loving Miro Empire led by Tristesse and her advisor Elfie, the plant-loving Linnell Empire led by the royal couple Rosalia and Zevin, and the Land of the Wind, which worships the Moon Princess. Our story begins with the royal family. Princess Spelani, full name Amalia Spelani, was born to King Attilio and Queen Maja, who had managed to unify the entire central continent under one rule without resorting to conquest. Spelani's mother would frequently travel between the kingdom and her homeland, wherever that was, but one day when the princess was only 9 years old, she simply didn't return. 10 years later, her father became very ill. Spelani learned of a special fruit on Snowfall Mountain that could save him and rashly went after it despite the serious danger, and when the king learned of this he went out after her, saving her life but being mortally wounded in the process. Upon her return to the kingdom, the governing council blamed Spelani for murder and locked her away in the dungeons, trying to make a deal. Split her power with them equally and they would vouch for her innocence. For 2 years she refused these offers until something happened. The fairy settlement Sugartown seceded from the kingdom. In order to preserve her father's legacy of complete continental unity, Spelani finally agreed to take the throne and share power with the council, essentially becoming their puppet. Over the next few years, she tried taking Sugartown by force, but the fairy Monie continued to drive her army off again and again, proving to be quite the troublemaker. Meanwhile, a parallel story of significance was happening far to the east. After being assigned a devotion in purple magic, the young witch Erin went off to attend magic school in Hell's capital, but ended up failing her classes and was unable to graduate. Instead of breaking the news to her parents, she lied and said she had graduated early and obtained a teaching position far away, when really she just ended up homeless and living under a bridge for a few weeks. But she wasn't the only one who had fallen on hard times, as the demon Coralan, who later changed her name to Iberi, found herself in a real pickle as well. She had graduated demon school, got a desk job at mega corporation PF Inc., and joined a sports team with her friend Carilla, but eventually committed an undisclosed infraction that resulted in her flying power being revoked and also getting fired from her job. But through a serendipitous set of circumstances, the Purple Witch and the Broken Demon met and became fast friends, then roommates, and after a number of years decided to move to the Spelani Kingdom, where they took up residence in the abandoned Purple and Red mansions respectively. While exploring her new home, Iberi discovers the Scarlet Skull through an ancient shrine, and Erin recognizes it as a powerful artifact that can be used to restore her flying power, by taking it from someone else. They enlist Princess Spelani's aid to choose a target, and to no one's surprise, she sets her sights on the one and only Monie. This is where the game begins. While playing in a cornfield with her friends, Monie comes upon the skull and has her flying power unceremoniously stolen by it. Chasing after the strange object brings her face to face with Spelani, who overpowers her with a new anti-magic shield. Monie retreats to the edge of the cliff, and as the princess's guards come to capture her, the cliffside crumbles, taking the flightless fairy down with it. But instead of hitting the ground, she lands in a strange dark realm, and after destroying a statue there, suddenly finds herself back in Sugartown with a cool new glitching power. Most of the game after this point is Monie trying to track down the skull's owner and get her power back, which leads her to confront Aaron and Spillani multiple times, though neither one is able to do much more than slow her down. Eventually, she makes her way through haunted forests and ancient temples to the Red Mansion, where Iberi has been patiently waiting. The demon reveals herself and attacks Monie for the right to keep her flight, but is unable to best the small fairy. This is where we get to the first, and by far most simple ending, the return. Only moments after Iberi's defeat, Aaron suddenly comes to her aid, carrying both her friend and the skull off on her broom. If Monie has not yet collected all of the magical amethysts hidden throughout the world, she is unable to pursue and has no choice but to return to Sugartown, where she is reassured by the other fairies. Alternatively, if Monie has collected every amethyst, this encounter results in a second ending, the chase. After Aaron and Iberi fly off, the amethysts come together to summon Willa, Monie's magical cow friend, and together they fly in pursuit of the escaping duo. It doesn't take long for them to catch up, blasting the two friends down to the foot of Snowfall Mountain, where Monie demands they give her power back. Surprisingly, Iberi agrees, despite Aaron's protesting. She explains that flying used to be what gave her life purpose and happiness, and losing it was a crushing blow, but she has come to realize that she doesn't need it after all. She now has a best friend in Aaron who brings her far more joy than her wings ever did. Now understanding, Aaron initiates a ritual to siphon the flying power back into the skull, but just before she can transfer it to Monie, Spillani bursts into the clearing and throws her aside, taking the skull into her own hands. Iberi quickly transfers some of her own life energy into Monie to help her recover, giving her the strength to chase Spillani to the top of the mountain. The princess loses her temper and inadvertently smashes through the stone, causing them both to fall to the center of the mountain, which, as it turns out, is actually a volcano. So ferocious is the ensuing battle that the volcano erupts, and though Monie passes out from the heat, Spillani manages to get her out in the nick of time. Aaron flies the unconscious fairy home, and when Monie awakens a day later, she learns that the eruption had scattered pieces of the skull all across the land. Aaron and Iberi generously offer to find the pieces as a way to make it up to her and spend the next couple of months traveling all over the kingdom to keep that promise. This brings us to the third ending, the Reckoning. As Aaron and Iberi make their way back to Sugartown with the completed skull, Aaron becomes distracted by something and disappears without a word. Meanwhile, Katani tells Monie of a mysterious island that appeared near the Red Mansion, and so she heads there to find a large shrine with places for each of the 4 medals she had collected along her journey. Once inserted, they summon an ominous purple island that hovers high above the land. Only a short time later, Iberi learns that a purple witch was seen flying up to this island, and so she and Monie go to Spillani and plead for her help getting there so they can find and save their friend. Despite her initial reservations, the princess finally agrees, and soon Spillani, Iberi, and Monie set out in one of her airships. Upon their arrival, Monie and Iberi drop to the island at opposite ends to work their way to the middle, and though it doesn't take long to find the purple witch, she is possessed by a dark presence that tells Monie to stop defying her fate and subsequently attacks her with powerful magic. Monie is unfazed and drives it out, leaving Aaron unconscious, and after telling Iberi to take her back to the ship, runs into the pyramid after the darkness to prevent it from ever messing with her friends again. Now appearing as a shadowy figure, it tells Monie that Aaron had actually trained to let it into her mind, and after telling Monie to accept her fate that she will never fly again, destroys the Scarlet Skull for good. What follows is a trippy, multi-stage sequence that I'll be discussing in more depth later, but ultimately this entity reveals herself to be Kanika A, the goddess of death, and she is here for Monie's soul. But Monie is unbreakable, getting up to fight over and over again, and when a legion of moths come to the fairy's aid, Kanika finally backs down. She lets Monie go, but leaves her with a message and warning. Namely, that she is lucky to make new memories even after losing her power, and should enjoy what she has without looking back. Shortly thereafter, Spillani ventures into the pyramid herself to retrieve the exhausted fairy, and as they begin the long flight home, Aaron regains consciousness while Monie falls into a deep sleep. Spilani reveals to Aaron and Iberi that she has decided to acknowledge Sugartown's independence and resign as monarch of Spilani, explaining that she doesn't think her parents' legacy is dependent on the Empire's name or if their daughter sits upon the throne. She has accepted that everything has to end one day and is ready to move on and no longer be trapped by her past. Or in other words, to enjoy what she has without looking back. And that's exactly what she does. Spilani approves Sugartown's independence to the delight of the fairies, Aaron and Iberi move into one of its vacant towers, the governing council is dissolved following the princess's resignation, and with no monarch or council left, the kingdom has its first open election. Everyone reconnects with old friends, makes a bunch of new ones, and it's a bona fide happily ever after across the board. Right? Well, maybe, but as it turns out, things are a lot more complicated than this ending makes them out to be. Let's rewind a bit and return to the confrontation with Kanika. If this whole ordeal felt a bit extreme for a little fairy just wanting her flight back, that's because it is. This isn't really about Monie's flying power at all. Rather, it's about her cheating death. When she tumbled off the cliff at the very beginning of the story, Monie actually died, but did not suffer the consequences, or at least not the consequences you would expect. To understand how and why this happened, we need to first take a step back and frame the story in the context of its many Egyptian influences, starting with the very nature of the human soul. According to ancient Egyptian mythology, the soul consists of 9 separate parts that together make up a whole individual, and we see all of these represented on Monie's journey. Ka is the spiritual essence of a person, basically what many of us today would consider a soul, and is visually depicted as 2 arms forming a U-shape. That's what these structures are, Monie's spiritual essence. Ba is the bridge between mortality and the afterlife and takes the form of a bird with a human head. This is what Monie obtains her glitching power from. Based on just these 2 elements, we can start to see what's going on here. Monie's spiritual essence was separated from her body, ready to travel to the afterlife, and this shrine was intended to take it there. But let's continue with the other 7 parts. Ket is the physical body. Not much else to say about that. Shut is the shadow self that helps guide the other parts of the soul and appears each time Monie fails within the pyramid. Ak is the immortal, transformed self formed from the final union of Ka and Ba and is essentially the version of an individual that will experience eternity alongside the gods. We see Monie's Ak after moths come to her aid in the fight against Kanika, her physical form altered dramatically. Sa is an aspect of the Ak that appears as a ghost or in dreams and is separated from the rest of the soul following its judgment. I believe this is the shadowy form seen here during the Sugartown sequence. Ab is the heart, specifically the spiritual heart that was weighed to determine an individual's worthiness, which is shown here in the crayon drawing. Sekem is the vital life energy of the soul and manifests as the power to control your surroundings and outcomes. This is Monie's unbreakable will that drives her actions throughout the game and is acknowledged by Kanika herself. Finally, Ren is an individual's true name given to them by the gods, and so long as it exists, that being will persist throughout eternity, or in other words, to the end of time. I believe that Koga may be Monie's true name, as this entity perpetuates her chaotic legacy, but that's pretty deep speculation. Alternatively, Ren could just refer to the name Monie. Another important emblem I wanted to briefly call out here is the Was Scepter, a forked staff with an animal head that was a symbol of control over the forces of chaos, and we see several of these wandering around at the bottom of the cliff. Moving on from the soul now, let's discuss the gods. As shown in a series of murals found in the Boss Rush Tower, there are 4 main deities of this world, who I'll be referring to as the Lotus, the Beast, the Moth, and Death. The Lotus goddess represents life, growth, and plants, and might be the Linnell referred to in Rosalia's compendium entry. She was possibly inspired by Nefertem, the Egyptian god of the lotus flower, who bloomed at the beginning of the world and symbolized creation. The beast god is the most mysterious of the 4, but might represent animals, aggression, and destruction. The moth god represents transformation and chaos, and is likely inspired by Set, the Egyptian god of chaos and storms. And of course we have Kanika, who is the goddess of death, order, and fate, and is likely inspired by the Egyptian god Osiris, who ruled over the underworld. These 4 great beings existed from the beginning of time, and other murals show how balance was kept among them. Upon death, all human souls return to a cosmic center, and each deity claims a portion of them in what appears to be a cycle of reincarnation. They are forces opposed: order and chaos, plant and animal. We see in this sequence that Monie was claimed by the moth deity, but in a way that may have broken that delicate balance maintained for so long. When she fell off that cliff earlier, she didn't get a magical glitching weapon from her ba, she is the glitch. This is why Kaneka wants Monie so badly to right this error in the great cosmic order, to fix the glitch in the system, if you will. But even with this new perspective, some things still don't make sense. It hasn't been that long since the cliffside incident, so why does Kaneka make it sound that way? Why does she accuse Monie of being willfully ignorant? And why would she say that they have met before? To find these answers, we must move on to ending number 4, the secret. When Katani's compendium is finally completed, she prompts Monie to explore the Purple Mansion more thoroughly, leading her to find a secret room containing Aaron's diary. Despite the strong warning on the cover, Monie reads it anyways and learns how Aaron was practicing dangerous transformative magic. At first, nothing appears to happen as a result of reading the book, but when Monie tries to leave the room, she is suddenly attacked by a strange skeletal figure. The next thing we see is Katani sitting with Monie, who appears to be crying, in a small stone room. Katani tries reassuring the poor fairy when suddenly Demir, her partner at the dig site, warns her that she is not alone. The last thing we see is a ghoulish, horrifying version of Aaron and a horde of twisted cat minions descending upon her, saying only these words, "Let her." This ending is quite shocking, but some important context is provided by the murals from the tower. We see that Katani is a modern archaeologist who is studying pyramids, mummification, and emblems of Egyptian lore. She drives out into the desert to find an old temple half buried in the sand and finds Monie sleeping upon the sarcophagus of what appears to be Princess Spolani. And when she is properly distracted by the fairy, death creeps up behind Katani in the form of a powerful undead entity. This is a huge twist in the story and seems to raise more questions than it provides answers, which it does because there's an even deeper layer to which we must descend. Not an ending, but a beginning. The beginning. In all 12 of the main levels, a secret dream image can be revealed by resting in a specific location marked by 2 moths, and when put together they tell a very interesting story. It all begins on a small homestead out in the countryside. 2 sisters can be seen playing around a tree, one carrying a cow doll, and from their room we can see that one is tidy and the other less so. One day, their parents take them into town where they see a young elvish, or Miro, girl performing in the square, and the father decides to adopt her into the family. For a time, the expanded family is happy together. But things change when the father learns that this new daughter's homeland and people are being torn apart by war, and, now feeling personally invested in the conflict, he decides to go off and fight to do what he can. Unfortunately, he is killed, and the Miro girl is so racked with guilt that she leaves the family. In the next image, we see that only the mother and 2 original daughters are left. There appears to be discord between them though, coping leading to clashing, and one day the youngest sister goes off behind the big tree to cry. Without warning, enemy raiders attack the settlement and, being on the outskirts of town, this homestead is where they strike first. The raiders are driven off, but not before this daughter is killed, speared through where she stood. She is buried at the top of the cliff where the family was last happy. Years pass by and the remaining sister grows up tall and strong, following in the footsteps of her father. We see that she has his hammer, but the mother is trapped in the past and obsessed with trying to recover her lost daughter, even turning to necromantic purple magic, but to no avail. Finally, desperate and with no options left, she appeals to the moth god to intervene, ultimately sacrificing her own life to bring her daughter back. This dream sequence is the bedrock of the entire story and, along with the secret ending, completely recontextualizes everything we've seen so far. Most notably, the 2 original daughters clearly resemble Monie and Spolani in looks, behavior, and interests, with the sole exception being that Monie appears fully human. Is it really them? And if so, how can we reconcile this with the story we've already seen play out? Well, now that we know both the beginning and the end, it's time to tie everything together. It's time to tell Monie's story. First off, we must accept that the dream story is what really happened, the objective truth. A very long time ago, Monie was human, a simple little girl living a sheltered life, engaged in a playful rivalry with her big sister Amalia, or Spolani as I've been referring to her. And this really shouldn't come as a surprise, since their relationship as siblings is actually hinted at throughout the game. A sign in the very first level nonchalantly states that the best rivalry is a sibling rivalry. Allison states that Monie and Spillane look very similar, and Monie remarks that they've been fighting since forever. But unfortunately, her idyllic childhood did not last. The addition of a new big sister led to the loss of their father, and not long after, Monie herself was killed by a spear during the raid on her home. This fate is repeatedly hinted at. Not only is a spear seen right next to her cow doll, but when Monie is first judged by Kanika, she is impaled by a spear, and an image of the clifftop grave in Kanika's eye briefly flashes on the screen. In another sequence, Monie is forced to leap into a pit of spears, and, most telling of all, she eventually finds herself caught between a row of spears and a puppet impaled by a tree, which explains why the haunted puppets have a sizable hole in their chests. But despite this violent end, Monie did not stay dead, for thanks to her mother's efforts, the moth god intervened and returned her to life in a new, immortal form, frozen at the age she had died. This is what is shown by the crayon drawing. Death drains all color from the world, and the moth brings it back, in the process carrying Monie home to her older sister. But the young girl does not emerge unscathed from the land of the dead. The star tattoo around her eye is actually an emblem of death, as seen in this hieroglyphics panel, and shows that she has been reclaimed. What happened next is depicted on the wall of murals. Monie sits upon Spillane's shoulder, perhaps as an advisor of sorts, though she is still merely a child and plays with dolls. Eventually, Spillane dies, and, heartbroken, Monie chooses to be buried with her, laying upon the cold stone sarcophagus to be as close to her sister as she can. And then, like a tree bursting from deep folds of gray matter, a new world is born out of the fairy's mind, one that bridges the worlds of the living, the dead, and the imaginary. In Egyptian mythology, the afterlife was believed to be a paradise that appeared as a mirror image of earthly existence, and based on this mural of the star-eyed moth bridging two worlds and the fact that Katani's globe is being reflected slightly differently in a mirror, I think Monie is pulling souls from the afterlife and combining them with elements from her own mortal life to form a new world that exists in the space between them. A world of denial, in which her traumatic memories are repressed and the people she loves can be with her forever. It is a place where she can have her cows and Spillane can have her nights, where she can eat candy for every meal, never have to go to school, and even be a superhero to all of her imaginary fairy friends. The dreamlike nature of the Glitch Fairy world is alluded to multiple times throughout the game. Book 10 in the Red Mansion's library reads, "Did you know that our favorite star is the reason we're here? Without it, there'd be no animals, no trees, and you wouldn't be reading this right now." A sign in the Magic Forest says, "A fairy's mind is incredible, but yours is something else." And another sign on the Purple Path implores, "Stop being weak, make your wishes come true." And that's exactly what Monie did. But importantly, Spillane wasn't the only person Monie lost and wished to see again. Going back to the dream images, we can identify the other two women in the family by their hair, Tristesse and Rosalia, both of whom show up in Monie's world too. And while their roles in the story appear quite minor, it is notable that each of them provides one of the medals Monie needs to find the truth, and Tristesse also gets her very own doll. But things get even more interesting when we realize that each of these four individuals also represents one of the four deities. Monie is the moth, for obvious reasons. Spillane is death, a human who stands for order and will not abide lawbreakers. Rosalia is the lotus, a bringer of life who is obsessed with plants and quite literally wears them. And Tristesse is the beast, being a fearsome warrior who also has a soft spot for animals, as all Miros do. I suggested earlier that the father of the original family went to war to fight for his adoptive daughter's people, and my reasoning for this is that in the compendium entry for Tristesse, we read that she and Elfie saved their species from destroying itself with war and founded the Miro Empire. In Monie's fantasy world, Tristesse simply solves the problem herself. But there's something weird about this pattern. Wouldn't it make more sense for the four main characters in the story to correspond to the original four family members? In other words, why Rosalia and Tristesse and not Aaron and Iberi? That's actually something of a trick question because I think both pairs represent the same characters. Aaron represents the mother as well, specifically after she had lost Monie and became obsessed with purple magic. And Iberi represents the oldest sister, specifically before joining the family. She also has pointy ears, is connected to animals by virtue of being a demon, and her main power is pyromancy, which corresponds to the fire twirling we see the girl performing in the square. As for the father, he's kind of the odd one out here, but I think is being represented by Spalani's late father, King Attilio. At the very least, the uniforms do match. I know this probably sounds complicated, but a simple way to think about it is that the souls of the 5 members of Monie's family are echoing throughout time. More specifically, a part of their souls, probably the Ka, and this is supported by the Will-O-Wisp compendium entry which says that the glowing lights found in Monie's dreams are spiritual scraps that refuse to disappear. Furthermore, to the far left of Sugartown, we find a statue depicting the life cycle of a moth next to a gravestone with exactly 5 flowers growing beside it. Perhaps each flower represents one of the family members whose souls are now in a perpetual cycle of metamorphosis, taking different forms in this world that can overlap chronologically. This all raises an important question though. Exactly how real is Monie's dream? If it's all in her head, then does anything that happens even matter? Hard to say for sure, but I think so. Imaginary though it may be, plenty of other real souls exist here as well, to the point where it could be thought of as its own world independent from reality, something like a pocket dimension. And for a good long while after its formation, this dream world existed in relative balance. But then something changed. The beast god interfered. In Iberi's account of obtaining the Scarlet Skull, she describes seeing 4 giant 3-fingered hands reach out to her, and at the end of the strange ritual she is left with the skull. We know these 2 elements are indeed connected to each other thanks to this mural, which depicts the artifact surrounded by those very same hands. And while the god's motives for offering it to Iberi are not entirely clear, it probably has something to do with the fact that it is trapped in the volcano with the Lotus goddess, chained down by a sarcophagus, perhaps the same one responsible for the creation of this world in the first place. Regardless, the skull sets in motion the events of the whole game, disrupting the balance of the world by messing with its creator. Monie falling off the cliff and dying is not something that should be able to happen, but it does, and what happens when you die in a dream? You wake up. Monie is jostled back into the limbo between life and death, and upon her return, she is essentially lucid dreaming and able to bend reality everywhere she goes, causing a great deal of chaos in the process. And this is when the goddess of death decides to get involved, selecting and training Aaron as her means of piercing into Monie's dream bubble and putting the world back in order. She destroys the skull, explaining that it has caused too much trouble in your world to Monie, and tries to force her back into deep sleep, or her pre-glitch state at the beginning, using the faces of her original lost family against her. But in spite of her great and terrible power, Monie cannot be broken. She is the god of her own world after all, and so Kanika decides to back down and let her move forward into a brighter future. This brings us finally to the enigmatic secret ending. Where does Katani fit into this story? And how can she be present both in the real world and the dream world? A detail of no small significance is that she actually tells Monie about the archaeological dig shown in this ending, revealing that it took place 8 years before at a ruined temple in the Badlands Desert. But when Monie eagerly asks what they found inside, Katani simply says that she can't reveal any information about any archaeological finds and leaves it at that. So here's what I think happened. When Katani found Monie in the tomb, she woke her up, abruptly forcing her out of the dream world as represented by the sudden attack and resulting shot of Kanika's eye in the cliff where it all ended. Monie is shocked by the transition and overcome by emotion, hence her distraught appearance, and Aaron, now transfigured into a ghoulish form and tasked by death to guard the dream, swiftly emerges to rectify the situation. I'll be honest, it's not entirely clear to me how she ended up in this state, or how she is now outside the dream, though it does seem to be implied that Monie reading the diary is what caused this to happen. Anyways, she comes upon the intruder uttering the words, "let her," and I think the last one is "rest," and then Katani is killed. The mural makes this pretty clear, as the hands grabbing her shoulders are the very same that pulled Monie's mother to the grave, and then of course there's the symbolic spear pointing at her throat. But instead of being pulled to the afterlife, Katani's soul is sucked into Monie's world. In a sense, the dream has become another cosmic center that souls can return to, and this is why people from all different time periods have ended up here. Time is only relative to a being like death, after all. And once in the dream, Katani simply keeps doing what she has always done, being an archaeologist, documenting all of her discoveries so she can pass the knowledge on to future generations. And on that unsettling existential note, we come to the end of this video. As you can see, The Glitch Fairy is a game of many, many layers that can be interpreted in just as many ways, and while this constitutes my best attempt to make sense of them, it is far from being comprehensive and leaves out some pretty significant stuff like the full hieroglyphics, the fates of the fairies, and the end of time. The thing is, this story of gods and monsters and magic kinda devolves into chaos no matter how you look at it, and it's very difficult to get every piece to play nicely with the others. But I think that's the way it's supposed to be. The eternal conflict between chaos and order is such a central part of this story, and to seek a complete understanding of Monie's world is essentially to play the role of Kanika. Like her, we can try to wrangle the Star Fairy as best we can, but ultimately she evades our grasp with a blast of blue magic and skips off to fight another day. All the same, I think there are plenty more mysteries to be unraveled in this incredible story, discoveries yet to be made, and I would encourage you to play the game yourself if you haven't already done so and see what you can find. To wrap things up, I want to make it very clear that my interpretation of the Glitch Fairy as presented in this video is deeply subjective. It is not a definitive explanation by any means, and I think there are plenty of other ways to interpret the story and characters that are equally valid. Regardless of your interpretation though, I think the central themes of the game remain equally relevant, and that's what matters most. The Glitch Fairy is a story about moving forward, embracing the inevitability of change even when it isn't fair. It really wasn't fair that Monie was killed or that her power was taken from her. It wasn't fair that Spalani's mother left, or her father died, or she was imprisoned in her own castle. And it also wasn't fair that Ibri had her flight revoked and her entire life upended. But at the end of the day, happiness can be found in accepting the things we can't change and making the best of our present circumstances, a lesson that each character learns in their own way through the crucible of adversity. Thank you so much for watching, and I sincerely hope you found this video entertaining and helpful for understanding the story of the Glitch Fairy. If you'd like to see more content like this, be sure to like and subscribe so you won't miss anything new, and in the meantime, feel free to check out some of the other story breakdowns I've done on the channel. That's all for now, but I hope to see you in the next one.